XboxEra podcast is powered by you, and if you want to support us, you can do so via Patreon. Just head to patreon.com/XboxEra. And as a thank you for your support, you get cool stuff and we get to keep doing what we do. Now let's get into it. Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 105 of the XboxEra podcast. I'm Sik and Mechanico, and I'm joined, as usual, by Special Nick.
What's going on?
And this week, we are joined by an Xbox legend, a father of sorts of the console that everyone is playing today, Mr. Ed Freeze. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Thanks heaps, mate.
Ed was a little bit nervous.
Nervous. I don't expect someone as prominent as yourself to just be like, yeah, cool, I'll jump on, not a problem. When do you want me to jump on? And I'm like, nah, this can't be the real person. It's like, no way.
It's almost like we've been burned before.
Just before we started, right? I was reminding you how to pronounce my last name just in case.
Yeah,
but
we've got it right.
I'm a rock climber. I rock climb mostly indoors these days for a long time, and I climb with my boys. And so, my oldest is in college right now. But my 17-year-old and I go every Sunday. We'll go out and we'll go climb, and we always come by and we stop at Five Guys Burgers and Fries.
Good choice.
Yeah, and I always order, on my phone ahead of time, and it pops up and it says Ed Fries, right? And so I show up, and they like, oh, the fries guy is here. Fries, It's like, I mean,
you must hate everyone in that.
I'm like a hero there when I walk in. They think I'm an owner or something, but anyway.
Oh god, that's good.
Got some stocks in potatoes somewhere. I don't know. I'm sure there's been many annoying puns at your
Every
name, so we
joke
thought we'd skip
imagine,
them.
Yeah.
So it's not often we get gaming execs on, although we do love to do it. And not all gaming execs play games, but as evidenced by your background, it's pretty clear. Not only do you play them, I think you make them too, and we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. But we normally start every week talking about what we've been playing. And I don't know about you guys. I know everyone's playing like Elden Ring or whatever the new release is on PlayStation at the moment, because I think Xbox has been a fairly quiet time. I dipped back into Hades and got lost for a long time. Probably the last 2 days has been just a quick Hades run. 50, 60 minutes later, another quick Hades run. So I'm really enjoying that. And I missed it when it came out. What about you, Ed? What have you been playing this week?
Boy, you're reminding me I need to go back and spend time with Hades.
It's a really good
I'm a big fan of the Supergiant guys, and they sent me a beta, and we messed around a little in beta, and then I just didn't do it when it came out, and was amazed to see it go on and win all these awards. And so
it's a very well-made game.
It's a good game.
Super great team, super nice guys. Crazy stories of the pandemic where they were out of their office and they were watching their office through their webcams, and people kept breaking into their office and stealing more and more and more stuff.
No.
Finally, finally they thought they had taken everything out, and then somebody broke in and stole their income taxes. I think I can tell the story. But anyway, and then and so then the CEO was like, oh my God. And he gets this, meet me in this alley and I'll sell you back your income taxes, and it's like
what
nutty stuff. So I feel bad for them, but anyway, but I think it's all sorted out now, and Hades worked out, so they're doing fine.
Yeah, it's a real good game.
I'm loving it. I'm completely lost, but yeah. Have you been playing anything the last couple of weeks?
It sounds kind of boring, but I have been playing a lot of Elden Ring. I honestly, the early Dark Souls games for me were just so brutally hard, and also I just didn't think they were that well designed. I mean, they were just kind of, especially the first one, it's just kind of confusing, and it's like, what is going on? And but my younger son, my 17-year-old, he loves difficulty in games, and he loved those games. And so when Elden Ring came out, it's like I held off at first, but then it just, I heard, oh no, you can play it, without it being incredibly difficult. I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to play a sorcerer. That's like what I do when I play Destiny. Is I want to be a sniper. I want to be as far from the enemies as possible. It's like the opposite.
Sounds like
of my
me.
17-year-old. My 17-year-old's right in their face, like bam, bam. And anyway, so yeah, it's been great to play as a sorcerer, and the game's very forgiving. There's lots of ways to find solutions to problems, or have even friends come in and help you, or you can hand the controller to your 17-year-old if you really get desperate. So it's been, I'm really impressed. It's definitely my game of the year. I just think the scope of it, it's just, I don't know, it just feels to me like a game, in the old days we were always dreaming about making, just really the fantasy world come to life in this huge place that so many directions you can go and so many secrets to find.
Yeah.
So I'm loving it. Before that, the game I really got into was Genshin Impact, and it was kind of similar in an open world sort of way, but very interesting to see how they made kind of a hybrid between mobile and PC. That it worked fine on phone, fine on iPad, fine on console. I wasn't sure that was possible to do, and then also kind of the hybrid business model with free to play. Again, another really excellent game, really well made.
Do you think we're seeing that more and more now? Like, when I think about, you look over the last 20 years or 30, 40 years of gaming, the technology leaps now, like when you talk about there's the game that people have always dreamed about making, and we're hearing about those kinds of games starting to come. Like we've got Starfield coming later on this year. Todd Howard and team have been talking about how this is the big sci-fi leap we've always wanted to be able to do, but the technology's never been there. But we're kind of just hitting that cusp now where cloud technology and the different platforms are all merging together, and all of that jazz is kind of hitting that moment. Do you think that's more and more going to happen, or?
Yeah, it's funny. A few different thoughts on that. I mean, one is that the game industry is kind of like this, where people think things are impossible, and sometimes they just don't do them for a long time because they know they're impossible. There was an expansion cart for the Nintendo 64 add more memory to the N64, and it didn't sell well. And so everybody in the game industry took away this lesson that you can never sell hardware, separate hardware. And that rule, was, people believed it, for more than a decade, until Guitar Hero came out and Rock Band, and then all of a sudden, I guess we can sell hardware.
I think Kinect still has the record, doesn't it? Kinect was the fastest selling consumer add-on.
Yeah, something like that. So so you see something like Genshin just kind of break the rules in a bunch of different ways. Actually, I just, as somebody who's been around games a long time and been involved in making games, I love to see a game that just takes a different approach, where everybody's sort of gone one way, and you realize, that was just an arbitrary choice, and we could have gone this way as well, But the other thing, so we're making progress sort of on the high end, right? Like something like, like Elden Ring, that just pushes in a bunch of different directions. But what I'm really excited about is the fact that the game industry is so fleshed out, to this and what I mean by that is a 2-person team can make a game and make money, and it doesn't have to be this huge production values thing. It can just be a cool idea. I don't know about you guys, but I find that true gamers, I'm not sure what a gamer is anymore, because we're all gamers.
Me neither.
But old school gamers anyway, I think we like to play everything, like I'm playing Wordle, I play spelling. I'm like playing too much Spelling Bee, the New York Times Spelling Bee, which is another word game, and I'm playing Elden Ring. I'll just play everything that's fun and has a challenge, right? So
yeah, very similar. What about you, Ed? What have you been playing? I call you, there's too many Eds. I'm so used to calling Nick Eds.
It's not Ed
anymore. It's a strange one, I know. Talk about slip of the tongue. What have you been playing this week?
So anyone that's been watching this show long enough will remember that I gave John a long, long time ago a code for Forza Horizon 5 Ultimate Edition.
It's true.
Which I wouldn't let him forget about it. That I gave that up. But John has kindly returned the favour.
You're welcome.
And I got a deluxe edition code for Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga. So I jumped into that, and it's pretty good. It's a lot. There's a lot of game there. Wow. Like, no wonder this game took such a long time. There is a lot there. But it's stunning, and it's a lot of fun, and they recreate the movies in a weird way, but they put that fun Lego twist on it and add some jokes and change things a little bit. It's good. It's been fun to go through.
I've been playing a little bit of it with my boy. And I agree with you. There are a few bugs though that have definitely, that.
I haven't experienced those.
It's mostly just loading into a screen of stars and nothing happens, and you just have to reset and reboot the game, and then it all comes to life again. Other than that, and I've had some characters get stuck, but when you have stuff, and that's, I think, to Ed's earlier point about you've got these 2-man teams making just a really simple but fleshed out idea versus huge teams making something that is just insane in scope and scale. Stuff sneaks through, and it will get patched, I'm sure, but yeah, just a few hiccups.
That's interesting, because Eden from the Xbox team was saying the same thing. She had full-on bugs during her run, and I have not experienced any yet. I guess I'm lucky, maybe, but no, it's a fun game. But aside from that, a lot of Rocket League, as usual. A lot of Rocket League.
Yep.
So good. I love it.
You still waiting for the golf version of that to drop later on this
year?
year? Definitely.
What's it called again? Turbo Golf Racing or whatever it's called, man.
Something like that. Who knows?
That'll be good.
From super acrobatic rocket powered battle cars to the golf version of the same thing. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so look, we've got Ed Freeze here. Helped sort of usher in the original Xbox, Microsoft's first foray into console gaming. There were a lot of naysayers at the time. I think that's fair to say, right? Microsoft was the Office, the Windows product guys. They didn't know how to have fun. I know you took part in the documentary, and you've done a couple of roundtables last year when it was the 20th anniversary. Yeah. Which must have been fun. Was it kind of like neat to kind of start looking back? And did you expect to kind of get a call and celebrate that moment in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, because they filmed that documentary actually before the pandemic. So
they
were really kind of a couple of years ahead. I guess that's Microsoft being organized or something. But I wasn't sure if any of that stuff was actually going to come out, but they really did a great job with it. I don't know. I'm not a huge social media guy, but I decided to use that as a kind of reason to post a bunch of items from my collection. And so every day for about 45 days coming into the anniversary, I posted a picture of one kind of rare original Xbox item. And so anyway, I guess people can still find those on Twitter or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, I've been enjoying those posts.
That was fun for me to do as a project coming in.
I saw that white one that you posted that had the was it Bill Gates that signed it?
Well, I have a kind of a smoky crystal one from Japan, from the Japanese launch that Bill Gates signed. It says
that's the one I'm thinking of.
It says Bill Gates, Ed Jr.'s first toy. He knew that that I was about to have my first son, who's, by the way, his name's Xander, Xander. He's named after the Xbox, but
nice. That's some dedication.
Yeah, well, it was my life back then. We this craziness for 2 years coming into the launch, and then we launched November 2001 in the US, and then February 2002 in Japan. And then my son was born in March 2002, so just a month later.
Wow.
So Bill knew that going into the launch in Japan. But I did also show a white Xbox that's the Ed Freeze special edition. So that's
saw that one too.
That's a one of a kind that they made for me as a gift when I retired from Microsoft a few years later. So yeah,
that's amazing.
it was crazy watching all that story of the rush to launch. Like I remember in the documentary, like how close to the wire it was, getting everything together, getting the hardware actually made and tested and boxed and shipped. I mean, you know, I think when we had Jason Ronald on, correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, he referred to the console launch of the Xbox Series X and S as the Dark Souls of console launches. Would you challenge that and say, nope, you weren't there for the original, buddy? That was harder.
Well, I mean, my group made all the games, right? So we did all the first party games. That was my job. And so I just had to believe that the hardware was going to be there, you know. But in those days, I mean, we had to have things we had to have it done. First, a few things to remember. You couldn't patch it. Like you're talking about, there's a bug in Lego Star Wars. Let's just patch it. We couldn't do that back then. You know, most of the machines were not online and would never be online, right? So it had to be right, and it had to be manufactured on a CD. So, which was a process where you had to send it to a factory and stamp out these CDs, build boxes. There's no digital distribution, so they're making, you know, millions of boxes. Then those are shipping all over the world. So the point is that there's like a couple months of logistics just to get something out. And so that meant we're launching in November. We got to be done in September. Well, something happened in September of 2001, and that was 9/11, right? And so that happened right in the middle of when my group was trying to lock things down for launch. And you know, it made it extra exciting. I think maybe we have that over the
that's right.
Xbox Series X guys.
It's crazy to me that was that. It's
that
long ago.
So, oh my God, 9/11 happened the same year the Xbox launched.
9/11. Wow. I was in San Francisco that morning to do a press tour. Seamus was flying into New York that day. Robbie, my boss, was already in New York that day.
Wow.
But, you know, we were doing Project Gotham Racing, and Project Gotham Racing is Gotham, because Gotham City, that's New York. We had the Twin Towers on our box and in the game. And so we had to decide what to do about that. I was also in charge of all the PC games, including Flight Simulator, which the terrorists trained on. So that was a PR issue for us.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was... Yeah, and plus, you know, we were trapped. Like we were trapped for weeks in different parts of the country, you know, which was not part of the plan either. So maybe that helped my team get it done because I wasn't there to be
no more middle management, you know, like
exactly. But yeah, so it was definitely crazy times. I mean, even at E3, you know, so that June before the launch, we only had half speed hardware. So we were, you know, the teams were developing on machines that were, at least the graphics were half the speed of the final performance. And so everybody had to just guess what it was going to be like, you know.
I'm starting to feel like your launch sounded a bit harder. You know?
Yeah, I think it might have been. Yeah. The company had never made hardware like this before. The hardware guys, you need to get some of them on. You know, their job was crazy for sure. But we all just kind of had to trust that everybody was going to do their part, you know, because otherwise it just wasn't going to happen. We just focus on getting our part right. You know, the Bungie guys did an incredible job with Halo, you know, and that ended up being really the difference.
For sure. I'm curious now. It's funny you mentioned Halo. I'm actually curious. So, you know, we all know or acknowledge that Halo was obviously an integral part of the original Xbox launch. I mean, one could argue without Halo, would Xbox even be around right now?
20 years later, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious how do you think, because now that you've stepped away, obviously, a while back, how do you feel like the franchise is going now? Obviously, you guys saw it out the door, but how do you feel it's being handled now? How do you feel, have you watched the TV show?
I haven't seen the new show, no.
No.
I gotta get my Paramount Plus hooked up apparently to watch that.
The Chief is getting more and more naked every episode, Ed. It's,
he is.
This is very grown up.
The helmets come off and
Oh jeez.
It's I don't know, I'm not minding it. I've just watched the 4th episode. It's not a bad show, but I was just curious how you think Halo is going as a franchise now.
It's honestly, it's a really tricky question for me because it's almost like asking a parent to, talk about their kids, and Bonnie Ross, who runs the Halo franchise at Microsoft, worked for me for many years. She was actually in the games group before I joined in the mid '90s.
Wow.
So she's fantastic. Kiki Wolfkill, another close friend who is behind the the new Halo series on Paramount Plus. She's an amazing individual. You should get her on here. I mean, she's like not only an incredible game person, but she's a race car driver. Whatever. She's incredible. And then the Bungie people are very close to me. I feel the guy who's the president over there, Pete Parsons. He's an old friend. He was my head of marketing for years before he went over to run Bungie. The president at Bungie's job is to do all the crap that nobody wants to do. That's what people the guy who's really like in charge is a guy named Jason Jones, who doesn't like to get in the press that much, but Pete's an old friend of mine, and so I'm kind of rooting for everybody to be successful. I guess that sounds like a political answer, but
it's a fair one, I think, especially if you've worked with all of these people for such a long time, right? Everybody deserves a fair shot. I mean, out of curiosity, is it weird to see that Bungie is now a part of SIE? I mean, did you wake up and go, well, like I didn't see that coming?
I think it would have been even weirder if Microsoft bought it a second time.
It would have been amazing.
I mean, I'm the one who, took the first phone call from Bungie and made the decision to buy them, negotiated the deal to acquire them. And and then they basically had gotten a big fight after I left with my successor and ended up sort of putting a deal together to leave. But they had to do multiple versions of Halo before they could sort of earn their freedom. And now, and now they're at Sony. I mean, I think within the industry, we're not always as competitive between each other as people might think from outside the industry. I've got good friends at Sony. I have good friends at Nintendo. I did back then too, when we were really competing against them in the press. We would joke about stuff each other said in interviews, or I think Shuei Yoshida of Sony is really responsible for a lot of Sony's success, leading their first party group over many years. He basically had the equivalent of my job, and I just look at the content that they put out, and they've really pushed Microsoft. They've really pushed Phil, to make some acquisitions and beef up the first party team, which I'm glad that's happening, because I think Sony was definitely pushing them. So, and that's, as gamers, that's what we want, right? We want these guys to be pushing each other, just trying to one up each other with their next game. I thought Horizon Zero Dawn, the original one, was incredible. It really caught me off guard how good that game was. The second one I didn't play just because I was like, Elden Ring came out. And that can happen too. I'm sure the second one's good too, but I'm like having too much fun with playing Elden Ring. I've played Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, that's great.
So
what do you got, John?
So when you look back now, it's been 20 years, and you're absolutely right. Bungie's divorced, they've got remarried now, but yet they're still going to see Microsoft, off the record kind of thing, or on the record, it's like a polyamorous relationship, I guess. You know, they're still making multi-platform games, which is an unusual deal for an acquisition, and kind of contrary to effectively what's been stated for Bethesda that we know of, right? Whereas, you know, some stuff maybe, but for the most part, you know, Starfield's exclusive and so on and so on. When you look back now, it's 20 years later. You put in the foundation, right, from a first party games perspective, and you look at where they're heading now. Are you like really excited for what they're going to do? Do you think that there's more to do? You know, because when we had Phil on for episode 100, which was really cool, and we joked that there's too many games, and he literally went, no, there's not too many.
There's
games.
never too many games.
We want to get to a point, and I'm paraphrasing somewhat, but we want to get to a point where we're launching a game pretty much every quarter of size, of volume, which, you know, if you've been a fan of Microsoft and Xbox and the dark times of 2013 to 2017, 2018, was a rough ride. And it feels very, very different now. It feels like they have their ducks in a row. They know what they want to do. When you look back at it, are you kind of really proud of the foundation you put in place and what they're doing now with it all?
Yeah, I love being associated with the Xbox, and you know, I'm proud that that's, you know, something that I worked on, and you know, it's something that you can mention to people and everyone knows what it is. You know.
Yeah.
Before I worked on, I made games when I was a kid in high school. I always loved games, and that's how I became a programmer, because I wanted to make games. But I did spend my first 10 years at Microsoft working on Excel and Word.
Fun.
So I started as right, and I you know, people ask, well, is that no, you know, and honestly, as a programmer, I had a ton of fun. I learned a lot, and those were great projects to be associated with. And you know, I joke that I run into accountants, and they're like, "Wait, you worked on Excel? That's so exciting!" Great. I'm glad you're excited about that product. I'm proud of it. But yeah, Xbox is a little more accessible. But anyway, a few things. So like, I guess the story I always tell about Phil is that I had about 1,200 people working for me when I decided to quit in 2004. I had one son, and I had a second one on the way, and I'd been at the company almost 20 years. It just seemed like the right time. And of those 1,200 people, one walked into my office and said, "Should I quit too?" And that was a young Phil Spencer. I'm like, no, Phil, you don't have to quit just because I'm going to quit. You know? But I really appreciated the loyalty, you know. And so I've known him a long time, obviously, and I'm a fan of Phil. And I was excited when he took over, and I think he really things were a little messed up when he took over, and I was happy to see the direction that he chose to take the group. And
yeah,
you know, every time now I hear like Satya Nadella, you know, CEO of Microsoft, saying good things about Xbox and continuing to support it through what's now, you know, with the acquisition of Activision. It's kind of shocking.
Just a bit.
I mean, that is the largest acquisition in Microsoft history by far.
And it's about games.
And it's a game company. And, you know, you got to remember when I was, you know, starting that group, I mean, it was, you know, there were just a handful of us. I mean, maybe 50 in my group. And we were just trying to get permission to make a game, you know. It's like we had I mean, like, they were really worried that we would hurt the Microsoft name, right? Like, we put out because it had Microsoft on our box, and what if we put out a game that somehow hurt Office sales or Windows sales because we hurt the Microsoft brand? That was the concern when I was starting, you know. And but at the same time, we were trying to like push to do what we needed to do to be a successful game company. You know, we wanted to do somewhat edgier content. And so our marketing guys were trying to push a little bit just with kind of the names of things. And so we had two games that they were kind of trying to push a little on the names. and we had to go in and we had to get approval from Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, right? And
that must have been a fun meeting.
Just for the names, you know, and this was early on in the game, long before Xbox. And so one game was going to be called Hellbender. And so just the idea that you'd have Microsoft on a box and it would also have the word hell was very scary. Whether we would do that, you would have, you know. And then the other one was called Deadly Tide. And it doesn't sound bad, but the thing is that Steve Ballmer came from Procter & Gamble, and they make the Tide detergent.
Oh, God.
And so here we were going to put a box that said Deadly Tide, you know, Microsoft Deadly Tide. So, yeah, so we go into this meeting, and we're very nervous about it. And our marketing guys do this whole presentation, and we stop and we look, and you know, Ballmer looks very concerned, but before he can say anything, Bill says, "I like it. These look like cool games. I like the names." And then you can just see Ballmer kind of biting his lip, and we're like, "Yes, Bill Gates spoke first."
Amazing.
So that's what it was like in the old days. So now to see, you know, the largest acquisition be, you know, for the gaming space, and to see Microsoft. I mean, we would try, you know, I remember, you know, talking to Bill when we were getting started and saying, you know, here's how I look at it, you know, you say Microsoft is about software, Microsoft software running on every desk and in every home, right? Every desk and every home running Microsoft software. Well, where's the home piece, right? And more like, look at how people spend their time. Like, you know, you have 24 hours in the day. You know, 8 hours you're at work. We're doing pretty good at work with Office and stuff like that, you know. 8 hours you're asleep. That's a tough market for software. Maybe we'll figure that out, but that one's tough, you know. And 8 hours, you know, hopefully you're playing, you're relaxing, you're having fun. That's where that's what we're doing. We're going after that 8 hour segment. You know, I think that resonated to some degree. So,
yeah, for sure. I know we've got there's quite a few people watching. There's a few super chats. Some of them are moderately entertaining.
So we've got Georgie who asks, "Ask Mr. Freeze to accidentally leak Xbox projects." Look, I don't know if Ed would still be totally over what's going on behind the scenes at Xbox, but who knows? Maybe he is. But I don't think he's going to do that today on the show.
I do not. I've not worked at Microsoft since 2004, so I do.
That's right, for a long time.
Yeah.
Tai Casares. Now, Ed, you're not going to immediately get this, but I'll explain it after I've read it out. The way this show is going, and he's referring to the Halo show, the way this show is going, we will see Nick's ring before the Holy Ring. So
that's somewhat crass.
So you said you haven't watched the show yet.
Right.
You will discover when you watch it that I somewhat resemble the Master Chief, at least in the show. They've used an actor named Pablo Schreiber for the Master Chief, and we very eerily look alike. So there's sort of an ongoing joke that I am in the new Halo show.
Well,
hence
that's flattering.
Inappropriate joke. Sir Monte Carlo, great show as always. Happy Easter, guys. Yes, happy Easter to everyone. Although it's Saturday where you all are. It's
tomorrow.
Easter Sunday for me, but yes, it's happy Easter to all of you anyway.
Tomorrow is fine by me.
Did Beast Mode ask one as well?
He did, yeah. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Oh, here we go. This will be for Ed. The one gaming acquisition you wish you had done.
Yeah, a couple got away. I'm going to do two. One, we were very close to acquiring Westwood Studios, actually.
Oh, wow. So Adam Icegreen's gig.
Yeah. So, of course, at that point, we had Age of Empires, and it was going really well. I had been a big Command and Conquer player, and I'd played Dune 2. I played the Blade Runner that Westwood did back in the day.
I love that game. I love that game.
These are old school, you know, we're talking now. But and I was getting, I was putting a deal together to acquire them, and I thought I had the deal done, but I was also getting married, and I was getting ready to go on my honeymoon, and which, by the way, I ended up going through Australia and New Zealand on that trip. But
Oh wow!
So I'm like, okay, guys, I'm going to be gone for whatever, a week, 10 days on my honeymoon. Like, don't screw this up. This deal is done. It's all lined up. It's all good. Just finish it off. I'll be back in 10 days. And I come back again, and it's like EA, stepped in and stole the deal out from under us.
Wow!
And I still think Westwood would have been better with Microsoft, but that one didn't happen. The other one that I tried multiple times to acquire was Blizzard.
Wow.
And so I tried really hard to buy Blizzard. I was a huge Blizzard fan. And again, if you think about kind of the roots of our PC gaming business was real-time strategy, and so Command and Conquer, then Warcraft, of course, was, their biggest product. Blizzard is a weird story. I'll say it as briefly as I can, but they got acquired very, very early in their history by this kind of learning company called Davidson, and so they were always part of this bigger organization. And what happened was they got put up for their parent organization basically put them up for sale once in the 90s, and I tried to buy them. And I got outbid by a company called Cendant, CUC, which runs a timeshare camping business. And I'm like, I just got outbid by a timeshare camping company.
Wasn't this owned by Bobby Kotick like before it became Activision?
This is all before Activision.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It got sold 3 times before it became part of Activision.
Wow.
So anyway. So Cendant CUC, they're part of that for a while, and then there's a bunch of, I don't know, issues with their accounting or something, and the whole kind of company fell apart. So then Blizzard gets put up for sale again, a second time, and I bid again, and this time I get outbid by a French water utility. And so
what?
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm like, what the hell? What?
I'm sure hell was the word. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there was this. When I say the name, you'll recognize it. But there was this company called Vivendi, and Vivendi was a French water utility that this guy decided should be a global media empire, and he just started acquiring things. It's a crazy story.
Wow.
But anyway, so yeah, I got outbid by a timeshare camping company, and then I got outbid by a French water utility, and then they made the game that I knew that they had in them, which was World of Warcraft, and of course then they were impossible to buy.
Legendary status at that
But
point.
I guess Microsoft bought them now, effectively. So
Yeah, I mean, it's not signed yet, but I don't see it failing.
So,
but yes,
yeah.
Man, that's crazy. I think we had another super chat.
Yeah, because we've got a super chat, so may as well ask. So Georgie asks, ask Mr. Freeze about the Nintendo buyout attempt. Were you in that meeting when they tried to buy Nintendo?
So, I think there were a couple acquisitions that were above my pay grade. I was in a meeting where we met with Nintendo when we were first starting to explore the idea of Xbox. We met with Nintendo with the idea that we could collaborate and that they could do the hardware and we could do the software. And you wouldn't know this, but their office is literally right next to the building where we were working in at that time. And so we went over to their building and met with these guys. And they could tell, I mean, right away that we had no idea what we were doing, what we were talking about, honestly. It wasn't that hard to tell. I remember them asking at one point in the conversation, like, which game console do you think has better performance, the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation? And PlayStation 1. And I'm like, I think that Nintendo 64. And they're like, no, that's wrong. So it's like half the performance of the PlayStation. I'm like, oh, okay. I learned something today. So anyway, it's kind of classic Microsoft hubris, actually, that you would even have this conversation. It's like, why would we? What? I mean, like, what are you bringing to this party? You don't have an arcade game. You don't know how to make console games. We don't want your operating system. Like, what? What exactly are you bringing? Why would we make the hardware and you would do the other stuff? But so there may have been some conversations beyond that about actually acquiring Nintendo, but I wasn't involved in those. I think there were some discussions about buying EA at that time, and I didn't want us to buy EA because it was basically what I was doing was running Microsoft's game business. So I'm like, I would rather do it myself. Attitude. But there were, above me, there were a couple layers that could have looked into that. And then Sony, there was also discussion between Bill Gates and Kutaragi of Sony about cooperation, but they couldn't find a way to do that either. So
that's so cool.
There were definitely efforts to, find ways to collaborate.
It's fascinating.
Well,
really.
I've got one I want to ask myself. So, and I know I'm about to say this wrong, Ed, but run with it. As a massive Sega fan growing up, I know I'm saying Sega wrong, but that's how I say Sega.
Okay.
I need you to clarify. Yeah. Is the rumor true that the OG Xbox was going to play? There was a plan for the OG Xbox to play Dreamcast games. Is that rumor true?
No. There was no plan to do that I ever heard, and I was pretty close to the project. I think that's mixing up a couple different things. So the original Dreamcast had a little Windows sticker on it.
Yes.
And you could boot it apparently into Windows CE mode, version of Windows Consumer Electronics mode. And I don't know anyone who did that. And I don't know any actual users who did it. I worked at Microsoft and I didn't do it. My group did not support that project. They came to us and said, will you make some games for this? We're going to make it so you can boot a Dreamcast into this Windows mode. And I'm like, why? No, I'm not going to do that. I don't think anyone's going to do that. Exactly. By the way, Dreamcast, Skies of Arcadia, great, awesome game. If you've never played it, that's the killer game there from my point of view. But by the time we were doing Xbox, Sega had already decided that they were getting out of their console hardware business, and we worked with them, and they supported. I made many trips to Japan to meet with Sega's game teams, and they made multiple games for the Xbox, and they were a good partner, but no, it wouldn't have made sense to run in Dreamcast mode. I don't even know how that would have worked.
Interesting, because that's the rumor. The rumor was that, I can't remember if it was Microsoft approached Sega or Sega approached Microsoft about the Xbox being able to play Dreamcast games. That was the rumor at the time. And I thought, since we've got it on, I'll see if there's any truth to that rumor.
Obviously people make emulators, right? And you could make an emulator, and as long as the new machine is sufficiently more powerful than the old machine, it's technically possible. Did anyone on the team have time to do that? No way. Maybe it was some project under Jay Allard on the system software side that they were going to think about it, but it probably went out the window very quickly if it existed. I never heard about it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There you go.
Maybe
the bubble has been burst, Nick.
Yeah, I know. Maybe we should get... That's a project for MVG. See if we can get him to get
Jay Allard on here, yeah.
to see if we can get a Dreamcast game to boot into, was it Windows mode? Because it had Windows CE?
Yeah, Windows CE mode, yeah. There is a way to do that.
We'll get MVG to try it out, see if he can do it.
See if he can. So MVG, just in case you aren't aware, Ed,
I don't know what an MVG
he's a
is.
YouTuber, but he's also a developer at Night Dive Studios, who actually, funnily enough, is doing the remaster for Westwood Studios Blade Runner.
Oh,
which,
really?
When we had him on, I was like, I need to know where this game is because
I was impressed that you knew about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up. My dad used to work for IBM.
Okay.
And we used to live in Sunnyvale, San
My
Francisco.
mom worked for DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation.
There you go. But he, my
there weren't that many computer companies back then.
No, right? And he was my entryway into gaming in general. He had the 486, and then when he got the Pentium 2, I inherited and so on, and I kind of had the hand-me-downs. So, but yeah, I grew up on Command and Conquer, Red Alert, Blade Runner, all the point-and-click adventure games, Amiga and stuff like that. And when I saw that they were doing the remaster of Blade Runner, I mean, I'm really excited to play it again because I thought graphically, even now, like I know it, if you go back and take off the rose-tinted glasses, it might not look as good as I remember, but it could look that good again in the remaster. But I loved the fact that it actually had random events that would change the story, like each time you played. It was a really cool project, and it captured the feel of the film very well. But anyway, that's a tangent.
Westwood, super talented team. That's why I wanted to acquire them.
Yeah, I can understand why.
Really great products.
Yeah.
But MVG's thing, that's how he got his name, with the homebrew stuff and writing emulators. And I think I'm trying to remember if he was part of the group or behind what's it called for the OG Xbox?
XVCD. It used to be the media player center. XBMC, something like that.
Yeah, I know they hack the hell out of those things, and they'll ship them.
He was a big part of that scene, MVG. He's great like that. But I'm interested. I might ask him about the whole booting a Dreamcast game into Windows CE mode or whatever it is.
He's due to come on
make
again.
It real. Make the history
the dream alive.
What you wanted it to be. That's why I made Halo 2600. Wouldn't it have been cool if Halo was on the 2600?
Now, that is a perfect tangent because my notes say let's talk about Halo 2600, right? Because before the show, before you dropped into StreamYard and joined us here this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, we were talking, and both Nick and I had no idea, Jesse did, that you made Halo 2600. And I was like, wait, what? He was like, yep, go look at Wikipedia. Ed made it. I was like, no way. So, was that just pure, I wonder if I can make this and passion project, and you thought you'd just roll with it and see what happened?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I am a programmer, and I got started on the Atari 800 when I was in high school, and learned to program first in BASIC and then assembly language, start writing my own games. And the 800 was kind of the spiritual successor to the 2600. The 2600 was the home game console. And basically what was happening, I was giving a talk in, I think, Philadelphia in 2009. And I always kind of mentioned how I got started in the game business and games that I made in the early days. And somebody came up to me after the talk and said, have you seen this book? And the book is called Racing the Beam, like racing the electron beam as it goes across the screen. And anyway, the book is all about the 2600, how it works. And I had always been curious about that because I knew the hardware in the 800 pretty well. Anyway, so I went home, read the book, and I was just amazed how primitive the 2600 was. I mean, it came out, a few years before the 800, but it was, it has 128 bytes of memory. I mean,
that's insane.
It's nothing, it has the same processor, 6502 is in the 800 and in the Apple II. But it has a limited version of it. It has missing some of the address pins. So it basically can only address 4K of code. So you've got 128 bytes of RAM, 4K of code, and it has no graphics memory. I've never worked on a machine that had no graphics memory. So
according to the chat, it has less memory than a tweet.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So how can you draw something on this? Like, so normally there's kind of a one-to-one mapping between a place in memory and something on the screen. So you put something in memory and a dot shows up on the screen. But this doesn't have, that would take thousands and thousands of bytes of memory, which they didn't have, right? So instead, you basically have to, the program has to know where the TV is drawing at any one time. That's the beam that they're talking about, erasing the beam. You know, a TV screen is drawing a line at a time down 60 times a second down the screen. And so the program has to know, oh, I'm on, you know, line 137, and if I wait, you know, 5 milliseconds, then, or microseconds or something, then I can, and I turn this bit on for a second, and then I turn it off again, I'll get a little dash on the screen, you know. And that's what you have to, and it was like, I'm reading this, it's like blowing my mind. How can you possibly make a game on this machine? And yet they made a whole bunch. And so I'm like, okay, I want to just try it, you know. And so, you know, because I'm a programmer, I used to work in assembly language on this, I can do this. So I get the assembler, I get the emulator, this thing called Stella, and I just work on it, you know. And I'm like, what am I gonna make? I'm like, I go into Paint and I just draw, like, okay, I'll do the Master Chief. So I drew a little pixel Master Chief, right, in Paint. And then I tried to get it to show up on the screen. And, you know, it was like a month's worth of work or something. And I get just a Master Chief sitting there on the screen. And then I'm like, okay, I'll make it so he can move around. So I give him 2 frames of animation, and I made it so he could run around the screen with the joystick. And they're like, okay. I'll make an enemy, and then I'll have, you know, okay, I'll make it so the enemy can shoot and he can shoot back. And, you know, I'm like, okay, I get at least how it's possible to do something on this machine. It's really hard, but it's possible. So then I go off to Game Developers Conference, which is in March every year, right? And I go down to GDC, and I'm just walking through the expo area, and I happen to run into Chris Charler, who runs, you know, ID at Xbox, right? And Chris is an old retro guy, and he's with a guy named Mike Micah, who is probably best known. Yeah, that's one of his things for sure. I was going to say he's probably best known, or was for a while, as the guy who hacked the Donkey Kong to switch the places of so that his daughter could play as Mario, and you had to rescue Mario as you were or whatever that is.
He's a digital Eclipse now, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so those 2 guys are standing there with some other guys, and so I walk up, and they're like, "Oh, hey Ed," and, you know, we're talking, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I've been doing some crazy stuff on the Atari 2600." And they're like, "That's so funny, because like right here, this is Todd Fry, the guy who did the original Pac-Man on the Atari 2600." I'm like, "No way!" And this is Ian Bogost, the guy who wrote the book Racing the Beam. And I'm like, "What? No way!" And they're like, "What are you doing with the 2600?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just screwing around. I just made a little Master Chief that you could drive around the screen." And they're like, "You're doing Halo for the Atari 2600?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that. I just was curious. I read your book, which was awesome, and I was curious, and I couldn't think of anything better to do, so I made a little Master Chief to drive around the screen." And they're like, "You're making Halo 2600?" And I'm like, "I am?" And they're like, you know, and they're like, "You have to do it. You have to. It's a moral imperative. You have to finish this game." Into this. Yeah.
I like that.
And then I was like, "But I'm really bad at drawing the sprites." And then Mike was like, "I'll draw your sprites." And then I'm like, "Oh, but you know, how will I test it?" And they're like, "We'll be your testers." And it was like, and so I was like, yeah, I walked out of there going, "What did I just sign up for?" You know. So then I basically set the deadline of that summer to have it ready for this big show called the Classic Gaming Expo, and worked on it like crazy, and got it done, and released it that summer, Halo 2600.
I've played it, and I'm enjoying. We've got some gameplay running, and Master Chief's little waddling legs are adorable, to say the least.
Yeah, that was definitely my art. Yes, I'm definitely more of a programmer than an artist, for sure.
I just love the fact that all you were doing was getting a picture of Master Chief on, and they were like, "Oh my god, you're making Halo 2600!" Just like straight away.
I'm like, no, I'm not. They're like, you have to do it. I had no choice.
Were carts produced?
Carts are out there. You can still buy them at Atari Age.
Wow,
really?
Yeah, collectors will come up to me and have me sign their cart, and
that's freaking.
They find me at a show.
Wow!
So it was super.
That's amazing.
It was a fun project, and I'm proud of doing. I'm glad I could still program in assembly language. So
yeah, I mean, it's nuts that almost. Going back, and how did they do this back then is almost more challenging than, we saw Unreal did this big show last week, right? And you can download a thing, and here's a kit bash of your standard first person shooter game or third person shooter game. Right. You can just use it for whatever you want. And I'm like,
exactly.
Okay, you can just drag and drop, and colors change. And
but what was it like to be a programmer on those machines back then, living under these really terrible conditions? Really tough machine to program on, and it ended up being really fun.
I know we've got some questions from the community as well, Nick. Great. Right? That are targeted at Mr. Freeze. So I don't know if we want to maybe pick a few of them just to make sure we get to them. I'm just conscious, we're coming up on an hour of Ed's time, and I don't want to lambast into like 2+ hours here, and he's sitting there falling asleep or something.
We'll keep him as long as he's willing to stay on, but I'll go through some.
Another half hour would be good. Let's shoot for another half hour.
There you go.
Okay. Alrighty, Jesse brother. Thanks, Nick. I was literally about to ask Jess if it was fries or freeze, and you were astute enough to clear that up right from the start. Then again, you are the guy who says Sega and assume, so jury's still out. Shadowless Edge, keeping it super short and sweet this week. Happy Easter. Well, for us Aussies at least at this point. What would an Xbox Easter-themed first-party title look like? And if Xbox were to release a chocolate pack for Easter, what should it contain? Keep up the great work. I'll be watching Chucky Eggs in Hand. An Easter-themed Xbox.
Okay, I'm going to answer a completely different question.
Good choice.
I've actually worked some on Easter eggs in games, and so when we were working on the early versions of Excel and Word, we always put Easter eggs into the programs, hid our names, and try to do it in some clever way.
Oh wow!
After I left Excel, they did a couple really big Easter eggs. They did a Doom that you could play inside Excel in one version, and they did a flight simulator in another version of Excel.
Wow.
I did not know.
People can look those up online. But when I started to get into fixing these old arcade machines, part of what I was interested in was just like how they work, because the machines I'm most interested in are what they call the Bronze Age games. They're in the 1971, which was when the first arcade video game came out, a game called Computer Space, to about 1975 when the first processor was used for a game. During that, in that window between those two, the games were made completely out of hardware. There's no software at all. So there's just a bunch of logic gates soldered together to make a game. And I had no idea. Again, I think working on Halo 2600 got me thinking, what if I go even farther back? Like, what will I
what if I hate myself even more?
Right. And exactly. And so it's been really fun to work on these, and I've written some about it on a blog that I have where I write about this work, and it's called edfreeze.wordpress.com. So if you just take my name and add wordpress.com, you can see some of my repair work on these machines and some of talking about discovering how that they work. But one of the things that I found was a hidden Easter egg in an arcade machine that nobody knew was there, and I found out about it because I interviewed one of the creators of the game. It's a game called Starship One, and it probably has the first Easter egg ever in an arcade video game. And so I'd encourage people who are interested in Easter and Easter eggs to go and read the story about the discovery of that. It's some of what I write about is pretty technical, but that story is not so technical. But it basically, I talked to this guy who worked on it. He knew he had put this Easter egg in 40 years before, but he had forgotten how to make it happen.
Oh,
He just
wow.
knew that it was there, and he knew some rough things about it. It had something to do with messing with the controls right as you started the game. And so I was able to get the code for the game. That at least was a game that works with, it was at a time when there actually was code. So a few years later, but still in the 70s. And then I was able to reverse engineer it basically in MAME, the arcade emulator.
Oh,
And
wow.
then once I could understood what it took to make it happen, then I actually bought the real machine, and then made it happen on the real machine. So that's that's the story that is told on the blog. So that's
unreal.
That's a better.
We've stuck a link.
Good. So that's a better Easter story than the question.
I like that Easter story. And it's weird because it got me thinking of Ready Player One. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh yeah.
With the whole adventure. What was it? Was it Warren
Robinette?
Yeah, Robinette.
In Adventure, yeah. And some people thought that was the first Easter egg, but now we've proven that there were Easter eggs before that.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's what got it into my brain. I was like, so there was another Easter egg before that. That's fascinating.
That's unreal.
In terms of branded Xbox chocolatey products, the thing is, I have a sneaking suspicion that, like the knockoff cheap Easter products that you get where the chocolate tastes really bad. Like I feel like that's the kind of chocolate. Like Microsoft wouldn't go with like a Galaxy chocolate or like a really I don't know. I don't think I'd want an Xbox Easter egg. I'm just being real. I think it would just taste bad.
I probably wouldn't eat it. I just put it on the shelf so they can just put other chocolate. As long as
I've got a delicious can of Sunset Overdrive up on my glass shelf from a Microsoft show. It's unopened, and I'm wondering what it's turned into now at this point because it is an energy drink. But
I have a can of Windows 95 beer on the shelf over there.
What?
Yeah. I'll grab it for you if you want.
Wow, what
I think I'm making that up. But...
the 95 beer. I've got a few beer aficionado friends that'll be like, we're gonna have to
Windows
look into
95 beer.
Yeah.
Wow.
The things
Those marketing guys. Exactly.
Yeah,
They're always making swag. Yeah.
While we're talking about candy, BRiT's got a candy question. Hello, gentlemen. I hope all is going amazingly well for everyone. How do you prefer your Peeps candy? I have never heard of Peeps candy. Mm-hmm. Fresh
I have no
or
idea
stale or slightly on fire and melty or simply
it's all
thrown
disgusting.
out?
What's
Peeps?
Gross.
What the hell is
So-
Peeps?
Marshmallow.
Peep is I guess it's a very American Easter.
Yep.
They're like marshmallow birds
Chickens?
and bunnies.
Yeah, I can see the picture here.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I am not a Peep eater myself, but my wife is a big Peep fan, and what she would say, I believe, is that it's important to age them. So you really don't want a fresh Peep. It's just kind of too soft and mushy. You want to get a little stiff, a little crispy, I guess. Yeah, that's what she would say. So.
I mean, I like marshmallow. So American friends, please send me some Peeps. I need to give them to my kids and watch them bounce off the walls and stuff.
Yeah, I'm not a Peep expert, but I live with them. So.
Okay.
There you go.
Dirty Flint. Hello to the boys and Mr. Freeze. This question is for Mr. Freeze. When is Halo 2600 getting a sequel? We've had many advances in tech since then, so maybe a platform like the Genesis would be a huge step forward. Gaming really needs this, sir. You know what? That's actually a pretty good idea. How about a sequel to Halo on the Mega Drive?
We've found you can be peer pressured into these things, so we just need to get a group of developers.
Actually, I learned from that experience. Yeah, so a few things. Moving to a more advanced machine would require more advanced stuff. Probably like a bigger, more program, more time. So unlikely to happen. I actually did
that's a
write. I did write a Rally X, a port of the arcade game Rally X for the 2600 that I never quite finished and published, but there's a good working version up on Atari Age for people who want to take a look at that.
Unbelievable.
Pretend you're in a warthog.
No, so that was one thing I was going to mention. I did when I was making Halo 2600. Actually, I worked on a kind of like an in-between screen that was where you drove the Warthog. And are you familiar with the old arcade machine Moon Patrol?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. It was basically like a Moon Patrol with a Warthog. And I wrote it, and it was about 1.5 K, and I only had 4K total, and I just didn't have room for it, and so I left it on the cutting room floor. But I did have a Warthog section of Halo 2600 at one point.
Oh, the
unbelievable!
The dreams. Maybe
that's
Halo 2601.
Maybe that's
maybe
the fact that you didn't finish Rally X. We won't hold it against you, mate. Don't stress.
You can tell I still feel guilty about it.
Okay, the Scarecrow 101. G'day to everyone on the panel, and another thank you to Ed for making the time to be on the podcast. Yes, thank you very much. Ed, when looking at your history since leaving Xbox, you have continued to develop, invest, and guide new ventures in the parallels of gaming culture, like figure prints and advising on the OUYA. Is that true?
I was an advisor to OUYA. That is true.
I did not know that.
I did start a company called Fingerprints. That is also true.
I did not know that.
Fingerprints, we did 3D color prints of World of Warcraft characters.
Wow. There you go. Scarecrow's done his homework.
And I run a venture firm now that invests in video game companies, and I should talk about that too at some point.
Yeah. Wow. Advising on the OUYA and Animoca brands. I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
Animoca brands. Overall this time, what is the personal guidance that you use to help guide these ideas to success? Is it in keeping up to date with current gaming culture, or does it come from your own desire to see something cool become available to everyone? Apologies for such an out there question, and thank you for your time.
It's a great question, and I would say it's more the latter. I love, I love working in the game business. I love being with game developers. I love playing games. I love making games. I love it all. So for me, when I left Microsoft, it was more about, well, how can I stay involved? There I was trying to cut back from crazy hours and spend more time with my kids as they were growing up and that kind of thing. But I still didn't want to give up the things that I love. And so I'm always trying to find ways to stay involved with the thing that I love. So I worked as an advisor to a bunch of game companies. A company called Pixowl did a thing called the Sandbox that they were then got kind of partially acquired by Animoca. It was one of the very first Web3 games. So we see crypto stuff coming in. That's the first place I heard the term NFT, which we've all heard now. But this was 5 years ago, and I'm like, well, what's an NFT? I knew what the blockchain was. I had mined my own Bitcoin back in the day, but I didn't know what an NFT was. And so just the technology is always changing in this business, and it's fun to a great way to stay on top of it is just to work with people who are doing cool stuff and learn from them. As far as the venture firm goes, about 3 years ago, I started a venture firm called One Up Ventures, and we invest in small up-and-coming game companies. And the whole idea of the fund is to make a lot of relatively small investments. Every investment is $500,000 each, but we do 50 of them. And then we connect the founders of those 50 companies together to form a community where they can all help and share with each other. And
That's genius.
We've done 42 investments so far out of the first fund. We're just getting ready to raise our second fund, and we're going to do another 50. But I will tell you that we're investment 44 will be a company in Australia.
Wow. Oh, wow.
First investment in Australia. So, yeah.
Boom.
That's cool.
It is cool.
That's really cool.
It's weird. I mean, it's when you talk about the building that community as part of those investments and wanting to stay connected to gaming, it kind of rings some parallels about why XboxEra exists, right? We were sitting out on the fringes. I'm not a game developer. I've been lucky to work with 343 on Forge, but that's because I make maps within Forge, and I got to fly out there in 2020 and see Halo Infinite earlier. It was very, very cool. But we started this because we love the industry, we love talking about games, and we also felt that there are, because a lot of modern day video game publications are so advertisement driven, are so click driven, with clickbait headlines and things of that nature. We wanted to do something that was purely community funded. So, and we're young still, I guess. Hopefully, maybe not Nick, even though I look older. But we've seen that passion reciprocated by people just like us who just want to talk about the games and enjoy the hobby and connect with other people with a similar mindset. And that's been extremely rewarding to see. So it's kind of like, I love that idea that, even someone that's been doing it for a very long time, used to work, very much in the core of it, was like, no, I still want to kind of be in the core of it. So you just went off and did it. I mean, I think that's great. I love that.
I'm fascinated by the fact that you advised on the OUYA. I got an OUYA. I was one of the people that kickstarted it. I thought it was a great little box. I loved my OUYA.
There,
was the Android one, wasn't it?
Yes, the little Android box.
I've got one sitting on my console shelf right over there. That was a time when Kickstarter was brand new. The idea that's, having gone through Xbox and seeing what a, multi-billion dollar company could do and how difficult it was, the idea that just some small group of people could make their own console, it just seemed insane, and I met with the people who were doing it, and and they were smart and they had good answers, and they asked if I'd be an advisor, and sure, I'll be an advisor, I'm proud of what they were able to accomplish, on that machine. It wasn't everything they hoped it would be, but they did a lot for a tiny team, making their own game console.
I loved it. I loved my OUYA. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
That was a cool little console.
Definitely have no regrets about being involved with that. The other thing that you were saying was about community and the connection to community. And that's amazing too. And it's something I'm still just kind of discovering almost in a way, it's like my TV viewing has moved from no YouTube to pretty much all YouTube at this point, and it's gaming stuff. It's also climbing stuff. And I have such access to the best climbers in the world, and seeing what, and they're all out there streaming now and talking about what they're doing online. This content is so much more tailored to what we care about. And it's so much created by fans, and they know the stuff best. And Elden Ring, I was just watching a few Elden Ring videos, giving me some tips I needed for my sorcerer so I can stay alive. I just completed the Ranny quest this morning. I'm very proud of myself.
Man, it's funny you mentioning climbing. I watched Free Solo.
Oh yeah.
A couple of weeks back. I have never sweated while watching. I'm sitting there uncomfortable. Nick, I don't know if you've seen it. And just for people watching at home, it's a documentary. I think it's on Disney Plus via the National Geographic section if you're interested. But it's a guy who's and you'll have to keep me honest here on where it is. It's in Yosemite Park.
Correct.
It's it's literally a sheer cliff, and this guy's like, I'm going to climb it with 0 ropes for assistance.
Yeah,
just literally a bag
ropes.
of chalk, and it is nuts. And I'm watching it. I'm like, because even the camera crew are like, could be filming this guy die. It's bonkers, but it's a brilliant documentary about a guy who's just like, I want to see if I can do it. So he does it. I mean, it's crazy.
I really do not recommend what he did to anyone. And he did not just go and do it. He spent many years training for it. And most people in the climbing community would have said it's impossible. And what he did was mind blowing. But I think we all still really worry about him. because it's a super dangerous thing to climb without a rope. I don't recommend it to anyone. And and sooner or later something's going to happen. And one of the parts that I liked about the movie was they did this psychological test where they show scary images and while they watch people's brain to see what happens, what part of their brain lights up and how much it lights up. And for him, they couldn't show him an image that would make anything happen in his brain. In the fear section of his brain, it's like he's like there's something wrong with his head, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
he was
a character.
So other people should not try to imitate what he does because they probably don't have that broken part of their brain.
No, I felt so
he is
sorry
a
for his
very
girlfriend.
talented climber, obviously, and he did an amazing thing.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to. I won't Google his
name. Don't
name.
want to encourage it.
Yeah, but definitely, it's a great documentary, so worth watching.
It's a great movie. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, last two questions. We've got last couple of questions. They're both pretty good
Perfect
too.
timing.
Proven. Hello, Mr. Freeze. Is there a game from the original Xbox that has been forgotten or is not well known that you have a fondness for? Also, is it crazy to see where Xbox is now in 2022 compared to where it began in 2001? Thanks.
So, there's certain games that I was involved with that I guess I'm just fond of because of my involvement. Probably the one that stands out in particular, I would say, is Blinks, the time sweeper.
I remember Blinks.
We set up a group in Japan and worked with a bunch of Japanese developers to come out with games. And like anyone who gets into gaming at first, it's always hard. I mean, you look at Amazon's been trying now for 10 years.
Yeah,
it shows how hard it is. It's a lot more than just money, And we set up a group there and we made some progress. People on Facebook the other day were some game people were trying to see who could name the lowest game ranking game that they were associated with. And they thought they were doing pretty good, but I won with a game called Sneakers. That was one of the first game that we made out of our Japanese group. It was really, really bad. But anyway, but a couple of years in, we started working with started working with them early, but a couple of years in, we were ready to release this game with this group called Artoon in Japan, and it was Blinks the Time Sweeper, and I just thought it had a great character like Japanese games always do, and it had a really cool mechanic where you could rewind time, if you died, and you could go back in time and then play forward again.
Well, thanks to the hard drive, right? Because Xbox had a hard drive.
That was what we said in the marketing, but I'm not sure that was.
Oh, it's the PS5 SSD.
Never confuse the marketing for the real life. But anyway, I was joking and I was like, it's the first 4D game because it's 3D plus the fourth dimension
plus
in time. And then the marketing guys, usually they didn't listen to stuff like that I said, but that one they grabbed onto, and so that was, so blame me for that. But anyway, but really, I think it was likely the inspiration for the game BRiT that came later, and did some really cool stuff with it.
I love BRiT
of messing with time, and so I think that's probably one that I would pick just because I made many trips to Japan and they were always crazy and weird and. Kind of turned me into a Japanophile, I guess, too. That's the other thing I watch is a ton of anime with my kids. We love anime, and we're all learning Japanese. Our Japanese isn't great yet, but it's not bad. During the pandemic, we've been doing, kind of 2 lessons a week, and we're getting there. I love the country. I love the attitude there, and I love to visit. And it reminds me of the time I spent there in the old days. So
a lot of nostalgia.
And the second part of Proven's question was: is it crazy to see where Xbox is now in 2022 versus 2001 when you helped launch it?
Yeah, I skipped that part because I'm not sure what it means. Is it crazy? I mean, yeah, I've had a crazy life. I don't know what to say. I mean, I thought when I worked on like Excel and Word, that was pretty cool. That it was like I got to work on things that kind of everybody knows, and they're kind of, see them everywhere. And but then the Xbox thing was a whole nother level. So I've just been really lucky to be able to work on the stuff that I love to work on. And I fell in love with games very early as a kid, and just to be able to make a career out of it, and to still be doing it, however many years ago,
classified
40 years later, and still be having fun and working with game developers. I just feel really fortunate. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's great. Awesome. Last question. Good old Collingwood. Happy Easter, John, Nick, and Jesse, and welcome, Mr. Freeze. Ed, is there a feature on the original Xbox that you wish you had developed further? With the kindness of hindsight, is there something that you could have fixed or reversed, or alternatively, was there a feature that you could have improved from simply good to something great? Yeah. John and Nick, have you got an Easter egg hunt for the family? Will you be dressing up in an Easter bunny costume? Has John's son got special dispensation for extra chocolate eggs and hot cross buns? Good old Collingwood.
No, he is not.
First, or
Easter egg hunts tomorrow. No costume. That's it.
Yeah,
we're not religious. It's just about chocolate for us. That's the end of
my
it,
kids.
so.
My kids did their Easter egg hunt this morning. I think my wife set it up last night, and they're doing it this morning. So I was not there for that.
Dedication,
but yes. So, is there a feature that you wish you had developed further, or something?
Yeah,
maybe
I know.
You could have fixed, or
absolutely, yeah. I was a big advocate on the original Xbox of including the hard disk. And to me, that was, without the hard disk, it wasn't clear why we would be different than just another PlayStation or Nintendo. And so I really think it was the thing that set us apart, but I also think it was underutilized. And I don't think we did a good job building into games features that would have been difficult for the competitors to imitate because they didn't have a hard disk. I think we didn't do a good job communicating to the customer what the benefit was. And so there were, I'm not blaming anyone on the team, I'm blaming everyone. We were super busy. We were making games as fast as we could, making the hardware as fast as we could. I think it's definitely the feature that's underutilized and underappreciated. For a good reason. It's interesting with Xbox 360. After I left, they made it optional. Maybe because I left, so there were actually SKUs of that's an internal term, but I mean the versions of Xbox that have that don't Xbox 360 that don't have a hard disk. And I was kind of sad when I saw that because I felt like that was a step backwards. And now, of course, all consoles have something like a hard disk, and so I do feel like we were ahead of our time.
For sure.
But we didn't really fully realize it. And by that I mean not that we didn't understand it, we just didn't have time to really make it be as great as it could have been.
Yeah. And I think we see that all the time, right? You see these bespoke features that a console might promote, PlayStation, its haptics and the DualSense, and 360, they had the HD DVD or Kinect, and then you get to a point where, okay, well, it's not with the console always, so we always have to cater for it without, and then you get developers. They'll go to lowest common denominator of, right, what's just going to work out of the box. I don't have to worry about customer A, B, or C. I can just make sure it just works. And I think that it's always worth taking the risk, but it's often determined by loads of other things. Like if you're the market leader, then what you put in might become the norm, and then the other people miss out, and so on. So it's always an interesting gamble, I suppose, because you can't tell the future until it's out in the wild, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely.
Fun times. Well, look, we're coming up on time for you, Ed, and I wanted to get one last question in. What was on my list, which is a really simple one. Xbox Game Pass. The surprisingly successful and frequent kind of positive news win that Microsoft get to kind of mention or talk about, the Xbox team do every couple of weeks. Do you subscribe to it, for one, and two, do you like this new digital all-you-can-eat buffet that we're kind of being served now, as opposed to going to a store and getting a disc? Like, do you think there's anything lost there? Or?
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings about it, actually. And it's probably one that Phil and I need to have coffee and fight about it. It's really tricky, because as a customer, it's a no-brainer, I think, to pay a little more than I'm paying for my Xbox Live subscription and get all the Microsoft first-party content for free. I mean, sign me up. I mean, but what worries me is what happened with Spotify in the music business. And for people who don't know, I mean, Spotify and other music streaming services basically cut the U.S. I only know the markets for the U.S., but it's probably true worldwide. The U.S. The entire U.S. music business in half. Within a couple of years. So it went from a $20 billion a year business to a $10 billion a year business.
Wow.
In a very short amount of time. Now they're back up to about 15, so they're recovering a little, but that's taken almost 10 years. So, and just for context, the worldwide game business is about $200 billion. And you get things like Apple saying we're just, maybe we're just not even going to sell singles anymore. We're not going to sell because how do you?
There's no money in it.
How do you compete in the good? So I really, as someone who works on the business side of games and supports game developers, I really worry about whether new game developers will have a chance for their games, and whether, if they're not in those kinds of programs. And if they are in those programs, well, what happens is there's basically a cap. There's only so much money you can get, right? Because the subscription is a set amount, right? And so it takes the really high highs of the game business out, and the really high highs pay for all the failures. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact that you can get rich, come out even like a small game, Valhalla or something,
or PUBG was one that just boom.
Yeah, exactly.
AZ.
A game can just take off and become huge. Rocket League would be another great example. And especially, I'm in the venture world now, so we make a lot of investments, and the whole model is based on the fact that, a bunch will fail, but hopefully one or two will become super valuable, right? If that goes away, I think it's going to really impact the number of people around the world who make games ultimately. And if there's less people making games, we'll have less original content, less new things happening. So that's I'm concerned about it.
I think that's a fair comment. I mean, I know that this is a discussion that's had, and I'm conscious I need to keep this fairly brief, but I know some of the feedback that I've probably heard to that kind of conversation is lower barrier of entry. People can still sell their games. I think the argument you're making is, they can still sell their games, but if customer A is sitting on Game Pass, and I think I can speak for most Game Pass subscribers, I buy less games because I kind of I'll just see what's in the subscription, that
right.
And it will take a very special game for me to break that rule and go and buy it. And I think that's what you're saying, right? Is if that mindset becomes completely prevalent, what happens to all the games that aren't in a sub?
Yeah. And we have this example of what happened to the music business. I don't want to see that happen to the game business. Yeah. So
it's a good debate. It's worth discussing, right? Let us know how that conversation with Phil over coffee goes. I'm sure whether you come out as a believer, I don't know.
This is my I'm making an invitation on this call for Phil to have coffee.
We'll ping him a link.
Well, you know what? We know him. We'll put you in touch. We'll put you in touch with Phil. Don't worry about it.
I think we've got to cover. Well, look,
he still answers my email, actually. So.
Well, there you go. But look, we're coming up on time.
Yep.
You've been an absolutely incredible guest, and I can see the chat has just loved.
Thanks
just
so
listening
much
to all of the
time.
stories. So massive thank you to hanging out with us today. It's been an absolute blast. Really enjoyed it.
I had a great time.
Thanks,
congrats on 105 episodes. That's a huge amount of work and a great accomplishment. And
thanks.
I was happy to be part of one of them.
Brilliant.
No,
well, look,
great.
It's as simple as when you want to bail, just click the X and we'll sort the rest out. But thank you very much. And chat. This was Ed Freeze. Anyone you want to shout out before you bail, or Twitter?
No, that's good.
You're good. Okay.
All right. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye.
Thanks heaps.
That was a really cool guest, Nick. Congrats on securing him. That was a chat.
He was really good.
That was some war stories. He was in the trenches, and it's a really interesting opinion on Game Pass.
Very.
Would love to dive into that. We should have asked that question earlier on. I just saw it on my list. I thought I'd sneak it in.
I know.
But what a guest. I loved that conversation. It's all the kinds of things that I like to hear about. So I hope chat enjoyed it too. But we're still here. We're still hanging out.
Yep.
So don't go anywhere. Because there's still the news of the week to talk about, right? Should we do the news?
I guess there is. Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing, there's a couple of things. So I'll do them in order of importance to me, from least important to most important or most interesting.
Okay.
Bugsnax is coming to Xbox. Cool.
Wow. That game that everyone pretended was like awesome because it was a PlayStation exclusive.
Yeah, that one.
The one that they were pretending was like the most awesome game of all time.
Yes, that one.
Okay.
That one.
Wow. Okay.
Looks fun. I mean, it's coming to Game Pass
for those that...
as well, right?
Yeah, it's launching into Game Pass.
I'll try it.
Hey, give it a go.
Yeah. So, we'll do that. And the other one I saw was No More Heroes 3, which this bugs me, right? Yes, it's coming to Xbox. Good news. What about No More Heroes 1 and 2?
1 and 2.
I guess, they've got to start somewhere, but can you help the fan base out? You want to build a fan base on this platform?
Yeah, maybe they'll do a port collection. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. Hopefully. It's good that it's coming, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's
coming in the
get
fall,
that on Game Pass.
So maybe they could get 1 and 2 out before, because it's not coming right away. Still got a ways off.
A couple of ports.
Wonder if they'll get it into Game Pass as well.
Well, we said this last week or week before, right? We've had the Yakuza series. Now is it time for the next bunch of Japanese games hitting Game Pass? Maybe you're right. Let's see what happens there. I sense there was a lot of eyebrow raising going on, Nick. I don't know. Like I was seeing a lot of
with what?
With maybe it will come into Game Pass. I'm suspicious of you, friend.
No, I haven't heard a thing. No, I didn't know No More Heroes was coming.
Oh, until you read that news story on our website.
Until I read the news stories. Yeah, I had no idea.
When Ed was talking about venture capitalist, investment, were you think they're thinking, well, we've got this little digital publication.
Invest in XboxEra.
Oh, he knows what we're talking about, right? Maybe he'll come away impressed, and we'll get a phone call in a couple of weeks.
I don't know. I'll jump into Twitter and say thanks again.
Yeah, and make sure folks watching, let him know that you really enjoyed that, because that was I loved that conversation. It was really, really cool. Next up on the news list, Vicarious Visions has finally completed its merger with Blizzard and has become Blizzard Albany. Am I getting that right, Jesse? You're the man in the know nowadays. No pressure.
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm just going to presume.
I'm just going to be honest.
But I think there's a lot of people sad that Vicarious Visions is gone, right?
Yeah, that's sad. It would have been nice if Microsoft had got there in time to stop that.
Well, maybe they'll reverse it or something if that team.
You are right. I looked it up. They are Blizzard Albany.
Hooray! I see. I remember things.
Sad.
But I guess the biggest piece of news this week, and I saw a bunch of stuff on Twitter this morning, was and Jesse, you'll have to remind me of the name here, was the Jez talking about it. We saw the We saw certain Affinity put out a tweet about, how deeply they've been working with 343 and they're deepening that relationship with Halo Infinite. Jez has said on, I believe the Xbox 2 that they're making finally the Battle Royale.
Last time we spoke about this, remember how we said there was rumors going around that certain Affinity were doing something, and we were like, that's got to be a Battle Royale.
Yeah.
I mean... It's
looking more solid now, right?
We spoke, even before Halo Infinite came out, you and I had that debate on this podcast. I was like, a Battle Royale is going to happen. You're like, I don't know. I'm like, nah, it's got to happen. Has to happen.
Playing the devil's advocate, mate. I think Battle Royales, and especially in the context of Halo, when we look at the dwindling player base, the sentiment about lack of content, it needs that one more go game type that isn't always ultra sweaty, that has the ability to do the annoying stuff like camping and farming or whatever, and getting your skins and getting your point. All the stuff that BRs are good for, Twitch streamers, all of that jazz. In order to keep Halo's place in its population, I think it's just going to happen. And I believe the leaked files refer to a bunch of different game modes where bots, 100 bots, 40 bots, 25 teams of 4, 20 teams of 3, stuff like that. We can see it on the screen now, thanks to Jesse's masterful production quality. And it's referred to as Project Tatanka. Tatanka.
And that's a wrestler who won a 40-man battle royale back in the day.
So, yeah. And Nick, I know we spoke about this before we went on air, but, it's certainly my presumption that they're going to be Spartans, and it's just going to be your multiplayer Spartan that you'll drop into.
I still find that disappointing.
And you want ODSTs, right?
Oh, the ODSTs drop in. That's like, how long have we said that? Do a Halo Battle Royale. Narratively, you've already got the setup with the ODSTs because they don't have a shield. They don't have the overshield, the shield that the Spartans do. So narratively, it already fits so perfectly. And the ODST drops in, and they got to look around for stuff, and they scout, and they do this. It's already a perfect fit. So I'm just, again, it's not the end of the world. It's just one of those things that I'm a little bit disappointed. It would have been nice if they did it with ODSTs, because they're talking about it being its own thing, kind of, in a roundabout way. Like Warzone is with COD.
Yeah.
And if it is its own thing, then let it be its own thing and have the ODSTs. I think the mindset will be, you don't want to invest in creating your perfect Spartan and then not use them. And I get your point. But I still think, if they're smart, they'll use the drop pods as the mechanic because it's freaking cool. Surely.
Yeah, and drop pods are mentioned in some of these leaks.
Excellent.
Oh yeah.
So
has
like
to be
the options one is of course I just closed them all. So yeah, one of the very first option is respawn in drop pod. That's like literally the first thing in the settings here.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this before. Battle Royale in Halo just makes sense. Like, the foundation for Battle Royale has been there in Halo from day one. Like, I'm to the point where I'm surprised that either Bungie or 343 didn't come up with Battle Royale first.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually shocked that they weren't first to do it. Big Team Battle was the OG Battle Royale, effectively. I know, not exactly, but you know what I mean. Like the origins are there. The big giant map, multiple teams of 2, 3, 4, duking it out on this map against each other. It was literally a mini version of Battle Royale there in Halo CE. Like, I'm shocked that they didn't think of it first. Yeah. Someone at Bungie wasn't like, why don't we expand this and make it like an even bigger map and have even more players and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm just shocked that they didn't think of that first.
Just watching Jesse drop a tweet out where he replied with a clown gif on the podcast.
What?
He was sharing a screen and he just literally dropped a clown gif out to someone complaining about lack of content if they do a BR. And it's like, dude, they've just hired another team to be producing the content. Like, that's the point. Oh dear, it does make me giggle. But yeah, So I mean, that's about the news this week, right?
The major-ish news.
I don't think there's much else there to deep dive into.
Full disclosure, I had to before the show, threw together some notes because I was genuinely worried that Ed was not going to jump on. It felt too easy. Like because like I said, we hold Ed Freeze in very high esteem within the Xbox community. So to me, that was a big deal. I was very surprised that he was so responsive to me, and I thought, this is just too easy. He's not going to jump on. Like, I'm worried that he's not going to jump on. So I had to quickly whip up some show notes in case he didn't, and we just went with a normal podcast. Yep. Luckily, he jumped on, and he was fantastic.
Mate, I actually think, Phil was great, and if we could have had Phil for 90 minutes, he probably secured the top spot in terms of guests, but I think Ed is very high up on my list because I love hearing about the crazy war stories and the smallness of, oh man, imagine a world where they got Blizzard before they released Warcraft.
No, I did not know that. And Westwood.
Imagine that world. I mean, that's crazy. Like, and people talk about acquisitions, and it just goes to show these things go on all the time.
That's right.
All the time, these kind of conversations are happening about putting a deal.
Acquisitions fall through.
Yep,
that's a part of the reason. I see the this is a tangent, so I'll read before I go on this tangent. I'll read a quick super chat. Ty Casares, apologies for the last super chat. I will try not to be so crude. And have you guys seen the next Season 2 skins in Halo? They look like Fallout costumes. One actually looks like a bad guy from Killzone. Yeah, I did notice that Killzone looking one.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Yes, so I see this sentiment online that no one knows about acquisitions when they're about to happen. That's not entirely true. The reason... There's a reason you don't see people talk about acquisitions. There is a reason for it. And I will toot my own horn and say I'm one of those people. Because they fall through. Like, as we just found out from Ed, Westwood fell through. And Blizzard fell through. And that's why you won't see people that do know about acquisition talk saying anything. Because it can fall through at the last second for whatever reason happens. Like I know, Rand's in the chat. Rand likes to make a lot of fun of me about this stuff. Yep. There's a lot of acquisitions I'd love to talk about that I get told are in the works, but I'm not going to do it because not all of them go through.
And it's not worth the internet flack if you do publicly say something and then it doesn't happen, you just get torn apart.
I think the only acquisition that I knew about that I was also sure went through that I publicly mentioned was Gearbox. That was the only one I have ever been like, yep, Gearbox. And that was it. And 3 days later it did. That's the only one. Nothing, because it's dangerous stuff as well. Like, depending on the size of the company, it can be dangerous stuff to talk about. Acquisitions.
Yeah, like if you start leaking details of an acquisition of $70 billion, someone's going to come knocking on your door.
Yeah, it's dangerous stuff. Like, that's why you don't see a lot of people name names and mention things and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I've said this before. We never heard back from ACG. Twice he did it.
Yeah. Twice
he talked about acquisitions happening. Nothing happened, and he never mentioned them, never mentioned names, never nothing, because it's muddy territory and it can get very dangerous. And that's why you don't, like now, apparently Jeff Grubb has said something about, because obviously Kojima
I think that's the only other newsworthy thing. It's a tangent off the acquisition stuff, right? So
Yeah. So Sony updated their banner. Again, they made a banner thing and they put Death Stranding in there and replaced Concrete Genie, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So people were like, they've acquired Kojima Productions.
Yep.
And then he came out and was like, nah, we're remaining independent.
He came out first with tweeting the image with no context whatsoever.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what sparked it, really. That's what the image changing started the murmurings, and then him tweeting it, everyone's like, oh, they've bought him. Like, clearly they've bought him. And then he's like, no, I'm independent, staying independent. I personally don't know how much I believe that, but that's just me.
Bluepoint said the same thing.
Yeah, Bluepoint. Well, after the Bluepoint image came out from Sony Japan, Bluepoint changed their banner. They changed their Twitter bio to say,
we're only
independent studio, blah, blah, blah. And then not long after,
they weren't
Bluepoint. So I do wonder, because we haven't heard much about the Kojima Xbox game and if it's even been signed and done or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the last we heard was that Kim Swift, who's joined this Xbox Cloud Gaming division, was meant to be working with Kojima on this particular Kojima game.
Allegedly.
But we have no new news on that front. So maybe Sony did swoop in.
Maybe. It happens. Like I said, stuff changes quick, as we heard. Westwood was done. Westwood was done. It was a done deal.
Someone went on holiday.
Someone went and got married. And all of a sudden, EA just swooped in and took Westwood from Microsoft. Like, this is what I'm saying. This is why you won't see people name names. Like, if Jeff Grubb is aware of an acquisition with Sony that he thinks is bigger than Kojima, he probably knows the name, but he's not going to say it. He's not going to say it because people will go, Jeff Grubb said this person's being acquired. And then if it doesn't happen, Jeff Grubb was wrong and blah, blah. No, like I said, you're not going to see people say names. But when you say, no one knows about an acquisition, that's not entirely true. People do know.
They're just a little cagey.
Would prefer not to say anything.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't even remember how we got into that tangent. But anyway.
It was a good tangent because it covered all of the news of the week. So the only thing we didn't do,
Rand.
hoping Jesse is... Sorry?
I said hi, Rand.
Oh,
because Rand's in the chat.
Hi, Rand. The only thing we didn't do, and hoping Jesse is on the ball, is a quick shout out
Patron Shout.
Our lovely patrons. If you're watching this podcast for the very first time, or even if you're listening to it for the 105th, and you haven't considered joining the XboxEra patrons, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/XboxEra. And for as little as $1, £1, an Australian dollar, you can support us and get no ads on the forum, or you can go big and get free merchandise and things like that. It gets you access to the Patreon lounge where you can bug us with fun community questions, which we did earlier on in the show. But in the interest of time, we wanted to make sure that we could get as much out of Mr. Freeze as humanly possible. Every time I say his name, though, I think of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. Everything comes with 9mm bullets on it and stuff like that. Like I can't help but think of Arnie whenever I think of Ed Freeze.
Get to the chopper.
Come on, we got to go now.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, do it. I'm right
That's
here.
the only time I'm doing that
Predator.
impression.
I'm right here.
Come on, kill me.
I had a green screen Mr. Freeze saying "Stay cool." I should have kept that.
We need to Photoshop his Ed's face into.
It's great that he was on for so long.
I know. I love the podcast where the guests actually come out and hang out on the show, and it's a little bit more conversational. We'll get there. But that's a great one.
I'd love to get him on again.
Oh yeah. I mean, if he had.
And now that we know he's like full on into games, like we can structure it differently.
Maybe we can get him to do a guest review.
Oh yeah, of Elden Ring. A re-review of Elden Ring.
I'm gonna give it that last 0.2 for the perfect 10.
Yeah. Nick, challenge. I'm laying down the gauntlet for you, man, because you are finding the good guests for us right now. I want to see if you can get either Chris Charla from Idea Xbox. If you can get him on, he was just on
the Xcast.
Was he? Well,
kind of funny Xcast.
Or, and this is the tricky one. This is the unicorn of guests. You will never get this. All right, I'm telling you now. You will never get this guest.
You will never get this. La la la. Jay Allard. Ooh, yeah. Jay Allard.
You will
would be an
never,
interesting
ever
one.
get that guest. If you get it,
I'll have a crack. I'll have a
Have a
crack at
crack,
Jay
my
Allard
friend.
and see how that goes. He'd
Maybe
be a cool
try-
one to get on.
maybe if Ed knows him and Ed might reach out on your
Yeah.
behalf, you could try that route. But if you can
Yeah.
get Jay Allard, I'm sure the chat would love to hear from the man that kind of oversaw that 360
The
generation.
360.
Be very, very cool, right?
Because we've had the man who oversaw the OG Xbox. We'll try and get the man who oversaw the 360.
Jay Allard was part of the creative team, but I think it would probably be Robbie Back is the man that oversaw the 360, right?
Was he?
Yeah, Robbie Back.
Okay.
Help me out, chat. Keep me honest, but I'm pretty sure.
Seamus, Winter Shoulder. Seamus.
Seamus needs to
Seamus, don't worry
respond
about
to my-
Seamus.
Seamus needs to respond to my DMs, is what Seamus needs.
Don't
to
worry about Seamus. Seamus, who
He's his
knows
own
with
thing.
Seamus? Seamus, the nicest way to say it is Seamus is a moving target. Don't worry, forget Seamus. Don't worry about Seamus. I'd love to have him on, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. I'll try and get Seamus too, but I don't know.
Let's see what you can do. I can
Ryan
see which-
McCaffrey seems to have no problem getting Seamus on.
Wow. Well, Ryan's got a different caliber of pull, right? He's been in the industry for a while. I can see Widger in the chat. Who is
he
Jay
didn't get
Allard?
Ed though. Oh, Peter Moore. Yeah, I'd love to get Peter Moore.
Oh, Peter
I'd
Peter
love
Moore.
to get Peter Moore.
Yeah,
Peter Moore's
Peter
a
Moore would be
gun. Peter Moore, he'd be
bit
so
of a
good.
ledge. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a gun. Like seriously, I'd love to get Peter Moore.
Sarah Bond as well.
Yeah,
I think
Sarah Bond.
we remember if it's a Microsoft employee, we've got to do it. A
Yeah,
certain way.
got to send the email. Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we get a list together. But look, we're coming up on 2 hours now. I think we've ticked all of our proverbial boxes. This has been one of my favourite shows.
It's good.
In a while. I've loved doing it tonight, and I wasn't
Ed
in
was good.
the best mood, but Ed pulled me right back into it. So,
Ed was good.
and the chat was wonderful as well. You guys were very well behaved. Lots of good questions, and from the community as well. So I think we'll close it out. Much love to everybody. If you're celebrating Easter or if you're just stuffing your face with
Happy
chocolate,
Easter to everyone.
have a good one. I know I will be having some chocolate tomorrow and doing Easter egg hunt. Nick, hope you can get out there to catch them doing it before they stuff it all into their faces.
That they would have done it earlier this morning. I could hear some noise in there, so
Oh, okay.
they're already done.
Hot on the mute button. But yeah, we'll be back next week, folks. So as always, stay tuned to XboxEra. We'll chat to you in the forums, and we'll see you next time.
Ciao for now.